It was just another quiet financial review inside Buckingham Palace until one line item froze the room. A hospital charge. Not just any hospital. Kate's hospital. And the cardholder? Camilla. The timing was impossible. The location? Suspicious. The amount? Unsettling. What was the Queen Consort doing near Catherine's private medical facility, and why was King Charles the last to know? Before the palace could contain it, the questions were already spiraling. The review had begun like dozens before it. Columns of numbers, predictable expenditures, security allocations, travel adjustments, charitable contributions. Nothing remarkable, nothing dangerous. Until a junior financial officer paused, leaned closer, and read the entry again. A discreet London clinic, a restricted wing, a charge processed under the personal card of Queen Camilla. For a moment, no one spoke. In the monarchy, silence is rarely accidental, it signals calculation. And in that silence, something shifted. Catherine's recovery had been deliberately shielded from public scrutiny. Access limited. Information rationed. Even senior staff were briefed only on a need-to-know basis. The narrative was tightly managed, protective, almost fragile. Yet this charge landed squarely within the period of her restricted access, a time when even extended family were discouraged from appearing. The amount was not modest. It suggested more than flowers left at reception or a quiet check-in. It hinted at a reserved space, a private arrangement, possibly even a consultation. And that implication alone was enough to ignite quiet alarm. Protocol dictated discretion, but instinct demanded escalation. The financial team alerted senior aides before the matter reached the king. That detail alone would later trouble him that others knew before he did. Within hours, the paperwork was no longer routine accounting, it was evidence. Carefully printed, quietly circulated. And when it was finally placed before Charles, the shift was immediate. He did not raise his voice, he did not speculate. He asked one question: why? No one had an answer. What unsettled him most was not simply the charge, it was the secrecy. Camilla's schedule that week had been tightly choreographed. Public engagements, recorded appearances, every movement logged for security and optics. Now a hospital payment suggested a deviation, a private detour, something unrecorded. And in a monarchy where visibility equals control, an invisible movement feels like betrayal. There had always been whispers of tension between Camilla and Catherine's, subtle differences in influence, in public affection, in future standing. Nothing explosive, nothing provable, but enough to form quiet fault lines beneath the surface. This charge pressed directly onto one of them. The palace atmosphere changed overnight. Conversations shortened. Doors closed more quickly. Staff who once moved with confidence began glancing over shoulders. Crisis management replaced routine administration. Because this was no longer about money. It was about proximity, about intent, about trust. And as Charles sat with the documentation in his hands, staring at the date, the location, and the figure that refused to shrink under scrutiny, he understood something chilling. Answers would not arrive gently. They would have to be uncovered. But the deeper King Charles looked into the charge, the more unsettling the timeline became, because Camilla wasn't scheduled to be anywhere near that hospital on that day. If the charge was shocking, the timestamp was devastating. According to palace records, Camilla was attending a public engagement miles away. Cameras were present. Crowds were cheering. Yet her credit card was processing a payment at Kate's hospital within that exact window. Was it an error? A coincidence? Or something far more calculated? Because once Charles compared schedules, he realized someone wasn't telling the truth. The king did not react impulsively. He never did. Instead, he asked for the official itinerary from that day, the annotated version, the one with precise arrival times and departure routes. It showed Camilla stepping into a reception hall at exactly 2:14 p.m., smiling, greeting donors, speaking about unity. The hospital charge was processed at 2:27 p.m. 12 minutes later, the location was clear. The authorization code confirmed a physical card present on site, no online portal, no delayed billing. It had been swiped. At first, Aides scrambled for innocent explanations. Perhaps a staff member carried the card. Perhaps a pre-arranged payment had cleared late. Perhaps a clerical error had misaligned the timestamp. But one by one, those possibilities dissolved. The card had security encryption requiring personal verification. The payment terminal was hospital-based. The processing time matched real-time authorization. There was no digital lag, no third-party handling. The implication hardened into something unavoidable. Either Camilla had been there, or someone had gone there in her name. Charles requested security movement logs quietly, without spectacle. Every royal vehicle is tracked. Every unscheduled deviation recorded. What returned to his desk hours later was not reassurance. It was a gap. A narrow window, 36 minutes long, in which one vehicle assigned to Camilla's detail had briefly disengaged from the public motorcade route. No explanation listed. No formal notation. Just a silence where documentation should have been. The palace, built on precision and procedure, does not tolerate blank spaces. Whispers began circulating among senior staff. A private matter, some suggested. A personal errand, something delicate. The phrase was repeated with increasing discomfort, as though language itself were trying to soften the impact. But Charles understood something deeper. In matters involving Catherine, especially during a restricted recovery, nothing is ever merely private. It is strategic. Symbolic. Political. He replayed the sequence in his mind. Camilla smiling before cameras while a vehicle peeled away unnoticed. A card swiped inside a medical facility housing the future queen. An unexplained 36 minutes. The elegance of the maneuver was almost chilling. If deliberate, it had been executed with confidence. If accidental, it bordered on reckless. And beneath the logistical analysis, a more personal question began to surface. Why conceal it? Why not inform him directly? Their marriage had weathered scrutiny, scandal, reinvention. They had learned the cost of secrets. Yet here was another one, quiet, clinical, impossible to ignore. The suspicion no longer felt abstract. It felt intentional. As aides lowered their voices and corridors tightened with tension, Charles sensed the balance shifting. This was not a clerical mishap. It was a narrative fracture, a divergence between appearance and truth. And if Camilla had indeed gone to that hospital without informing him, the act carried meaning far beyond a credit card charge. And when Charles quietly ordered hospital access logs, he discovered something that transformed suspicion into personal betrayal. Kate's recovery was being handled behind closed doors, literally. The hospital had assigned her to a restricted access wing, monitored and protected. Only immediate family were cleared. Yet the logs showed an unexpected entry request that day. Not approved. Not pre-cleared. But attempted. And when Charles learned whose name appeared in the system, the investigation became personal. Because this was no longer about money. It was about boundaries. The hospital's protocols had been constructed with almost military precision. Discrete registration. Encrypted access codes. Rotating security assignments. Even senior royals were required to confirm attendance in advance. Catherine's condition, whatever its full extent, had been treated as a matter of national sensitivity. Her privacy was not merely medical, it was symbolic. She represented continuity, the future, stability. To protect her was to protect the crown itself. Yet on the day of the charge, an access request was logged under Queen Camilla's credentials. It was flagged immediately. Not because she lacked status, but because her name had not appeared on the clearance list. The system recorded the attempt and denied it. No override was granted. No special privilege activated. For a moment, the hospital staff assumed it was a misunderstanding. Then they noticed the timing aligned precisely with the unexplained vehicle deviation. What unsettled them most was not the technical breach, but the implication of intent. When Charles received the hospital log, the quiet composure he had maintained began to fracture. He read the entry once, then again. An attempted entry, not a courtesy call, not a supportive visit arranged through him. An unscheduled approach. He understood palace hierarchy better than anyone alive. Lines exist for a reason. Protocol protects more than privacy. It protects trust. And this had crossed something invisible yet sacred. Reports suggested hospital administrators had grown uncomfortable. Questions were raised behind closed doors. Why had clearance not been sought through the king? Why had the request come independently? Even within royal structures, medical boundaries are rarely challenged. The denial itself was procedural, but the attempt lingered like a bruise. Catherine, by all accounts, remained unaware at the time. Shielded. Focused on recovery. Protected from unnecessary tension. That detail cut deeper than any financial irregularity. Because if Camilla had sought access without informing Charles, and without informing William, it signaled something beyond curiosity. It hinted at a desire to know what others did not. To see what was deliberately hidden. And that possibility felt dangerously close to confrontation. Was it concern? Was it an effort to manage information before it reached the press? Or was it something more personal, a need to understand the condition of the woman who stood next in line to redefine the monarchy? Charles could not ignore the quiet history between them. Differences in influence. Differences in public affection. A subtle rivalry shaped not by open conflict, but by positioning. For the first time since the charge surfaced, the king felt something heavier than suspicion. He felt betrayal, not explosive, not theatrical, but intimate. The kind that creeps in slowly and forces difficult reflection. If Camilla had attempted to bypass established boundaries, what did that say about the internal balance of power? About respect? About unity? The investigation was no longer administrative. It was emotional. It was personal. And as Charles sat with the weight of that denied access request, another detail emerged from the billing records, one that reframed everything he thought he understood. But Charles wasn't prepared for what surfaced next, because the payment wasn't for a visit alone. The charge wasn't for flowers. It wasn't for parking. It wasn't even for a courtesy room. It was coded as a specialist consultation in Catherine's medical department. Why would Camilla request access to doctors assigned exclusively to Kate's treatment? And more importantly, what questions was she asking? Because once Charles saw the billing classification, this stopped looking accidental and started looking strategic. The billing code was precise. It referenced a senior consultant attached directly to Catherine's recovery team. Not a general inquiry. Not an administrative discussion. A medical briefing slot. Reserved. Charged. Logged. The kind of appointment that required preparation on both sides. Charles stared at the document longer than he had any of the others. A consultation meant intent. It meant someone had sought answers. And answers about what? The specialty linked to the charge was not generic. It was specific to the area of Catherine's current treatment, a department shielded from public disclosure. Even within the palace, only a tight circle understood the full scope of her recovery. Yet here was evidence suggesting Camilla had requested time with a physician working at the very center of that circle. According to quiet internal reports, the request had been framed as a need for clarification, a desire to understand the medical outlook, the long-term implications, the projected timeline, words that sound neutral until placed in context. Because Catherine's health was not merely personal, it carried symbolic weight. Her future role, her visibility, her strength, all of it intertwined with the monarchy's stability. The doctors, bound by confidentiality, had refused to disclose specifics. Professional ethics prevailed. No sensitive details were shared. But the mere act of requesting that briefing unsettled everyone involved. It implied that Camilla was seeking information outside the established chain of trust. Outside Charles. Outside William. When Charles privately confronted the palace medical liaison, the response was careful but unambiguous. The consultation had been requested. It had been denied in substance, though the meeting time had been billed. Camilla had asked broad questions about recovery timelines and public appearances. Nothing explicitly hostile, nothing overtly malicious. Yet the undertone lingered. Why would she need that information directly? For Charles, the issue was no longer procedural. It was emotional. It felt like interference, like a quiet assertion of influence in territory that did not belong to her. The monarchy thrives on defined roles, boundaries, respect for succession, and Catherine, as the future queen, represented a chapter that would follow Charles, not compete with him. Speculation began to ripple beneath the surface. Was this about managing public optics? About ensuring continuity if Catherine's recovery extended longer than expected? Or was it something subtler, a need to measure the strength of the woman who would one day eclipse her influence? The tension was psychological, layered, almost invisible to the public eye. On the surface, Camilla remained composed, dutiful, engaged. But beneath that composure, the consultation request suggested calculation. A desire to know more than she had been told. Charles felt the weight of it deeply. He had fought for Camilla's acceptance. He had defended her place. And now he was confronting the possibility that she had acted independently in a matter touching the future of the crown. The investigation had moved from numbers to motives, from logistics to loyalty, and if Charles believed that a direct conversation would dissolve the unease, he was about to discover how carefully his queen had constructed her defense. But if Charles thought confronting Camilla would bring clarity, he underestimated how carefully she had prepared her explanation. When Charles finally asked the question why, Camilla didn't hesitate. She claimed concern. She claimed unity. She claimed responsibility. But beneath the composure was something sharper. According to insiders, her explanation wasn't apologetic, it was defiant. She insisted she had every right to understand the situation. And that single phrase ignited a deeper conflict inside the monarchy. Who controls the narrative when a future queen is vulnerable? The conversation was measured, but the air between them was not. Camilla framed her actions as protective oversight. She argued that in moments of uncertainty, someone had to think beyond sentiment and focus on stability. Catherine's recovery, she suggested, was not only a family matter, it was a constitutional one. If timelines shifted, if appearances were delayed, if rumors began to swirl, the monarchy could find itself exposed. She had acted, she claimed, to prevent chaos. She insisted she feared misinformation reaching the press before the palace could prepare. In her view, ignorance was dangerous. Silence invited speculation. And speculation, once unleashed, could damage not just Catherine, but the institution itself. "I needed clarity," she reportedly said. Not secrecy, not sabotage, clarity. But Charles heard something else beneath the reasoning. He heard independence. He heard a decision made without him. Camilla suggested, carefully but unmistakably, that Charles himself might not have been fully informed. That certain advisors were shielding him from harsher realities to protect his own peace of mind. It was a subtle assertion, but a powerful one, implying that her actions were not a betrayal, but a corrective, a safeguard. That suggestion unsettled him more than the charge ever had. Because if she believed he was being managed, where did that leave his authority? And if she felt compelled to seek answers independently, what did that reveal about trust within the palace walls? There was also the unspoken tension surrounding William. Camilla knew that Catherine was not merely Charles's daughter-in-law, she was William's wife, his anchor, the future queen beside him. Any action involving Catherine would inevitably ripple toward him. By seeking medical clarity, was Camilla attempting to anticipate William's next move? To position herself ahead of potential shifts in influence? Charles could not ignore the emotional undercurrent. The monarchy is built on hierarchy, but it is sustained by delicate personal bonds. Rivalries do not always roar, sometimes they whisper. And this felt like a whisper that had grown too loud. Palace staff sensed it immediately. Some quietly defended Camilla's logic, praising her foresight. Others viewed the move as overreach, a breach of boundaries too sensitive to ignore. Lines of loyalty began to blur. Whispers turned cautious. Meetings felt heavier. The unity Camilla claimed to protect seemed to be fraying instead. Charles remained composed, but internally the balance was shifting. He had spent decades fighting for Camilla's place beside him. He had endured criticism to legitimize their partnership. Yet now he was forced to confront the possibility that her determination, the very quality that had carried her through years of scrutiny, was colliding with the fragile equilibrium of his reign. And as he wrestled with her justification, weighing intention against impact, another development quietly surfaced within palace corridors, one that would complicate everything. Yet while Charles wrestled with Camilla's justification, another revelation surfaced, and this one involved William. William was not meant to learn about the charge, not yet. But palace secrets have a way of traveling fast. And when he discovered that Camilla had attempted access to Kate's hospital wing, sources say his reaction was immediate and unfiltered. This wasn't a financial anomaly. This was his wife, his family. And suddenly, the investigation wasn't just Charles's burden, it became a generational reckoning. The information reached him in fragments: a flagged charge, an attempted access request, a consultation inquiry. At first he dismissed it as rumor. Palace corridors thrive on exaggeration. But when confirmation came from someone he trusted, the restraint he had practiced for years began to crack. Catherine's recovery had been sacred territory, guarded, respected. And now he was hearing that boundaries had been tested without his knowledge. He summoned aides with a calm that barely concealed the fury beneath it. How had this been allowed? Who authorized the movement? Why had he not been informed immediately? The questions came fast, controlled but sharp. For William, this was not about hierarchy or optics. It was instinct, protective, fierce, uncompromising. His loyalty to Catherine has always defined him. Through scrutiny, through pressure, through relentless public expectation, she had stood beside him. Now, as she focused on healing, the idea that anyone might have sought private information without his consent felt like intrusion. And when that someone was Camilla, the emotional stakes doubled. There had always been a complicated undercurrent between William and Camilla. Polite on the surface, functional in public. But history leaves impressions that never fully fade. The past had required acceptance, cooperation, a delicate balance. Yet this situation reopened questions William thought had long been settled: trust, respect, influence. He requested a private meeting with Charles, not as heir, not as prince, as a husband. When father and son sat together, the conversation carried years of unspoken tension. William did not accuse. He did not dramatize. He spoke plainly. Catherine's medical space was not political ground. It was personal. And any action that blurred that line would not be tolerated. Charles listened, but beneath his composure was visible strain. Because he now faced something far more fragile than a public relations issue, he faced a fracture between his wife and his son. The monarchy depends on unity, on the seamless transition of authority from one generation to the next. Yet this incident exposed a fault line. If William felt undermined, what did that mean for future collaboration? For shared decision-making? For the invisible alliances that sustain the crown? Whispers intensified among staff. Some feared a widening rift. Others worried about shifting power dynamics if William began asserting stronger boundaries. Camilla's influence, once steady and carefully cultivated, now appeared vulnerable. And Charles, caught between loyalty to his queen and protection of his heir, stood at the center of a tightening storm. What began as a charge on a credit card had evolved into something far more combustible, a clash of authority, emotion, and legacy. And as father and son confronted the implications, neither realized that events were already moving beyond palace walls. But what neither Charles nor William realized was that the hospital itself was preparing a statement, and it would change everything. Hospitals rarely speak on royal matters, but this time, silence wasn't sustainable. A brief, carefully worded statement confirmed an unauthorized inquiry had been made regarding a patient under protected status. Names weren't mentioned. They didn't need to be. The palace immediately recognized the damage. Because once the public connected the dots, speculation would ignite, and the monarchy's internal conflict would become global conversation. The statement was only a few sentences long. Clinical, restrained. It emphasized confidentiality and institutional integrity. Yet between the lines it carried weight. An unauthorized inquiry. Protected status. Procedural denial. The language was neutral, but its implications were explosive. Within minutes, reporters began cross-referencing timelines. Online forums dissected phrases. The dots were not difficult to connect. The palace communications team moved swiftly. Calls were made. Drafts were written and rewritten. The official stance would be measured no confirmation, no escalation. But the speed of the modern news cycle does not wait for royal composure. Headlines sharpened. Commentators speculated. Analysts debated whether the issue was a simple misunderstanding or evidence of deeper fractures within the royal household. For Charles, this was no longer contained within private rooms and sealed files. It was constitutional optics. The monarchy survives on perception as much as tradition. Stability must not merely exist, it must be seen. And now the image of unity he had carefully projected was trembling under the weight of unanswered questions. Social media ignited first. Anonymous sources claimed inside knowledge. Theories multiplied. Some framed Camilla as overstepping. Others accused palace staff of incompetence. A few suggested power struggles tied to succession. None of it confirmed. All of it amplified. The phrase unauthorized inquiry became shorthand for suspicion. Pressure mounted rapidly. Journalists began requesting clarification from the palace. Was a senior royal involved? Was Catherine's privacy compromised? Had protocol been breached? Each inquiry tightened the vise. Silence, once protective, now risked appearing evasive. Inside the palace, tension escalated to something close to controlled chaos. Advisors debated whether a brief acknowledgement might calm the storm or fuel it further. Some urged Charles to publicly defend Camilla, framing the matter as a misunderstanding driven by concern. Others warned that any statement could validate the speculation. Every option carried risk. Meanwhile, Catherine remained shielded from much of the noise, but not entirely. Even in recovery, the emotional current was impossible to ignore. The idea that her health had become the center of public controversy added an invisible weight. Success and suffering collided, her quiet strength contrasted against the turbulence unfolding in her name. William monitored the headlines with growing unease. Charles read every draft response personally. And Camilla, outwardly composed, understood that perception was slipping beyond control. The hospital's brief announcement had shifted the narrative from internal investigation to public reckoning. What began as a line item on a financial report had evolved into a global conversation about trust, authority, and the unseen mechanics of royal power. And as the headlines grew louder, Charles faced a decision that would define not just his marriage but his reign. For King Charles, this was never just about a credit card charge. It was about loyalty, legacy, and the fragile balance between past and future. Advisors urged restraint. Some whispered discipline. Others warned against public humiliation. But alone in his study, Charles had to ask himself one impossible question. If boundaries within the royal family are crossed without consequence, what message does that send about the crown? He had spent a lifetime preparing for moments like this, moments when emotion had to bow to duty. Yet preparation does not erase conflict. It sharpens it. The monarchy rests on continuity, on the seamless merging of private bonds and public responsibility. But now those two worlds were colliding. His wife stood at the center of a controversy that threatened the unity of his reign. His son stood on the other side, protective and unyielding. And in between them stood Charles, not just a husband, not just a father, but a king. Some advisors urged him to handle it quietly, no spectacle, no reprimand visible to the public. A contained recalibration behind palace doors. Others argued that silence would look like endorsement. That perception, once fractured, demands visible correction. The debate was not about punishment, it was about precedent. If a senior royal could seek private medical clarity without coordination, what did that imply about authority? Charles understood optics better than anyone in the room. He knew how fragile public trust could be. His reign, though steady, was still defining itself. Stability was not inherited, it was proven. And every decision now carried amplified meaning. In private reflection, the burden grew heavier. Camilla had endured years of scrutiny to reach her place beside him. He had defended her loyalty publicly and personally. To distance himself now would not only wound her, it would signal fracture. Yet to stand firmly at her side without acknowledgement of the breach risked alienating William. And William was the future. The emotional arithmetic was brutal. Quiet adjustments began to appear. Invitations were reviewed more carefully. Public engagements were reshuffled with subtlety. Certain joint appearances were delayed. No announcement. No declaration. Just small, deliberate shifts that only insiders would recognize. A recalibration of presence. A narrowing of influence. Palace event planning reflected this tension, where Camilla might once have taken a central role in discussions tied to succession optics. Her involvement was now measured. Limited. Carefully framed. The message was indirect but unmistakable. Boundaries would be respected. Charles carried the weight of that choice silently. To the world, he remained composed. But privately, he felt the cost. A marriage forged through controversy now faced another test. A son's trust required reassurance. A monarchy demanded steadiness. The contrast was stark: outward dignity, inward strain. Success layered over suffering, the crown gleaming, even as the foundation trembled beneath subtle shifts of loyalty and power. And though the headlines began to soften, though the public appetite for speculation slowly turned elsewhere, Charles knew this was not over. Influence, once challenged, rarely returns unchanged. Camilla's role within the evolving structure of the monarchy had shifted, perhaps temporarily, perhaps permanently. He hoped the storm would settle. He believed decisive calm would restore equilibrium. Yet just as the atmosphere began to feel manageable again, just as the palace corridors quieted from panic to watchful silence, new information emerged, unexpected, destabilizing, impossible to ignore. But just as the storm seemed ready to settle, a final twist surfaced, one that reframed everything. Long after the statements were drafted and the palace regained composure, one question lingered in royal corridors. What exactly was Camilla trying to discover? Was it concern, control, or something deeper tied to succession and stability? Because insiders now suggest the consultation she sought may not have been about Catherine's current condition at all, but about future implications. And that possibility changes everything. The detail emerged quietly, almost as an afterthought in a longer medical summary. The inquiry Camilla pursued, according to those familiar with the briefing request, extended beyond immediate recovery timelines. It touched on projections, durations, long-term resilience. Not just when Catherine might resume duties, but how sustained those duties could be over time. That distinction is subtle. Yet in a monarchy built on endurance, subtle distinctions carry enormous weight. If the questions centered on future capacity rather than present health, the meaning shifts. It becomes less about compassion in a moment of vulnerability, and more about forecasting the shape of the crown years from now. Public appearances, global tours, ceremonial continuity, all of it depends on perception of strength. A future queen must not only recover, she must radiate certainty. And if someone were privately assessing whether that certainty could be maintained uninterrupted, the motive would no longer feel incidental. It would feel strategic. That possibility unsettled Charles in ways he could not easily articulate. Because forecasting succession optics implies preparation. And preparation implies contingency. Was Camilla anticipating a prolonged adjustment? Was she measuring the durability of William and Catherine's visibility on the world stage? Or was she simply attempting to reassure herself that the monarchy's next chapter remained secure? The tension around succession had always existed beneath the surface, unspoken, inevitable. Every reigning monarch knows that history moves forward with or without consent. But to see that forward motion examined through a private medical lens felt intrusive, analytical, cold. Between Charles and William, the emotional ripple had not settled. They had spoken. They had clarified. Yet beneath the civility, a faint distance lingered. Trust, once shaken, rarely returns unchanged. William's protectiveness remained fierce, even if unvoiced. Charles carried the weight of compromise. And Camilla, though outwardly composed, understood that her influence had subtly recalibrated. Not erased. Not diminished entirely. But adjusted. Meanwhile, Catherine's strength became its own quiet counterpoint. She did not engage publicly with the speculation. She did not address the inquiry. Her silence spoke differently, not as avoidance, but as resilience. In the midst of whispered strategies and shifting loyalties, her focus remained singular. Recovery, stability, family. That contrast, her quiet endurance against the turbulence surrounding her, only deepened public sympathy. Yet the unanswered question persisted. If Camilla's inquiry truly reached into long-term forecasts, what conclusion had she drawn? And what might she do with that knowledge? The monarchy thrives on continuity, on seamless transitions that feel inevitable rather than engineered. But beneath that polished surface, calculations are always unfolding. Evaluations, preparations, quiet positioning. What began as a single hospital charge evolved into a meditation on power, foresight, and control. Not explosive, not theatrical, but deeply revealing. And as the palace steadied itself once more, one truth remained suspended in the air, unanswered, unresolved, impossible to dismiss. Because in the House of Windsor, investigations rarely end with answers, they end with consequences.